Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Plum Health Direct Primary Care. Plum Health is your personal doctor on speed dial. For $75 a month, you get unlimited access to your doctor. Just call, text, or visit for anything you need. Up to 90% savings on meds, labs, and imaging services, and 90% of all of your healthcare needs are handled in-house. You get a personal, one-on-one relationship with your doctor with unlimited visits and spend as much time as you need to get your health on the right track. Serving Detroit and Oakland County individuals and businesses with new locations in Van Buren, Lansing, and Corunna opening soon. Find out if this is the right fit for you and sign up today at plumhealthdpc.com. That's plumhealthdpc.com. Hello, everybody, from the Daily Detroit studio at Tech Town. This is, of course, your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. I am Jer Stays. It is Monday, February 5th, 2024. And joining me at the table is an old friend of the show. And frankly, this is a topic that listeners always get excited about, want to know more about. And I went to an event last week that was very interesting called State of Transit. Joining me, Megan Owens, the head of Transportation Writers United. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
You know, listeners should know that you had such a large commute. One of the wonderful things about Tech Town is there's actually interview subjects just around the corner.
Yes, I had to walk a whole 15 feet to come chat with you. I guess sometimes I get the preview of your interviews.
The problem is, and you probably know this if you're listening to the show, that I'm a little loud, so I can kind of be heard through walls sometimes. Megan, I think this is a great time to catch up on the state of transit as a region. You know, so often we will focus on, say, DDOT specifically or SMART. We had Tiffany from SMART on recently. But it all works together because there is so much to be done in Southeast Michigan about transit. Your event, the State of Transit, was also here at Tech Town, about a half a block away at the event space over there. And there were some real heavy hitters in there and a great turnout. But I think let's start first with 2023. What are some of the things that you are feeling positive about? Because I think a lot of people look at transit and they just kind of maybe dismiss it, or it's always been this way, or whatever. But there have been some market improvements in 2023.
Absolutely. There's no doubt our transit system still has a whole lot of challenges, and I ride pretty regularly, and I've been stuck waiting on buses that didn't show. But we are seeing some huge progress. I think it is important to look back and recognize that places like Novi and Wixom have transit, which I don't believe they ever have, if not in at least several decades. So the fact that a whole new set of communities, people can get where they need to go, even if they don't drive, is really powerful. And pretty soon they're going to be extending, I think April, they're going to start expanding routes into Rochester and into Waterford. So there's been some exciting progress thanks to the Oakland County Transit millage last year. In both those communities, as well as even the rural areas in northern and western Oakland, have more transit options than they've ever had. And here in the city, we're seeing some exciting progress. The Q Line's really made some improvements in their reliability with things like that dedicated transit lane in front of the arena. That's huge to be able to move the Q Line more reliably. They're getting closer to their goal of running every 15 minutes. Even the People Mover, the fact that it's now free. You don't have to dig up 3/4 or fight with their change machine anymore. At least for this year, you can just get on and off Q Line and People Mover as easy as possible. And again, yes, some of that's for visitors, but a lot of local folks can use and appreciate it too. So there have been some real steps in the right direction. Oh, and I shouldn't forget the Detroit to Ann Arbor express bus, the D2A2. Is really growing in ridership and popularity. It's one of those, as people discover it, they're like, oh my gosh, for whatever, $6, I can, at almost any time of the day, zip over to Ann Arbor, and it's super easy, and it drops me off right downtown. And as more people discover that, it's really growing in popularity too. So lots of good progress.
Yeah, there's another thing where I even saw a pilot program coming up for something around the draft as well that's going to be over the next year.
Yeah, there's even more stuff coming up. In addition to the Detroit to Ann Arbor, they're also going to start by end of March running a downtown Detroit to Metro Airport.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the exciting piece. So have a nonstop trip directly from the airport to downtown Detroit. And yes, the smart 261 fast bus does connect.
It's a whole different thing when you have a direct route.
Yeah.
I went to the RTA hearing about it.
Yeah.
And I want to share with listeners, like, this transit stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. There were people from one of the casinos, there were hoteliers, they're going, hey, this is something we really need. And by the way, do you want to put this in front of my place? Like that, they wanted the stop to be in front of them or connected to them or near them somehow because they saw the business value of this sort of thing. And, you know, when I worked in corporate, one of the biggest things that was a pain in the tail and very different about other places is like you just had to have a car service that you paid for. When you work at a larger corporation, they just have a car service that they have to constantly pay for to like connect people, because if you don't, those connections are so rough if you're coming in as a traveler.
We tried to calculate out at one point in time how many bars or restaurants, how many businesses that had different parking shuttles that would take people, how many church vans, every different social service program had to have a van. And we weren't even able to put numbers on it, but it was massive how much our region is wasting on workarounds on those shuttle vans of the hotels the hotels that have to pick people up at the airport because there isn't a route hadn't been there a route like this. So yeah, I mean, both for the convenience sake and for economic sake, having these options really matters.
The other side of that is that people might say, oh, well, it's just downtown. But if you build out a system where everything's connected, then you start to open up even more doors. Maybe it starts downtown, and obviously some people will listen to this and go, it's not far enough. It needs to be rail, but we need to start somewhere. And patronizing those pilots, whether it's D2A2 or this airport service or anything else, that's important so people see the demand for it.
Exactly. Well, not just people in general, but funders, federal government. If you can demonstrate that there is real demand for some of these things, sometimes the federal government will pay up to half the cost of building something like a rail line or bus rapid transit. But you have to both demonstrate that there is demand and you have to demonstrate that you have ongoing operating funds.
And a plan, like a real put together plan. There was some news kind of broken at the State of Transit event with Lisa from the Q Line, Lisa Nuskowski, talking about the possibility of expanded transit lanes in Detroit, which would not just support the Q Line, but also help with DDOT and help with other things, because it can get a little congested sometimes. And also, I enjoy the Q Line. I ride the Q Line. I will be riding the Q Line later today. But I still think, this is my own personal opinion, I will not put this on you because I know you're in a different seat. Like, the Q Line has the original sin of not being run center route. And so because of that, being near the parking lanes, well, parker's going to park.
Yeah.
And that is just something that should have been thought about from the beginning of like, parking's hard, parallel parking's a pain in the tail, all that other stuff. Anyway.
I'll totally agree that yes, it was not built the way they wanted. If only they had listened to us. They should have just let me. But
seeing that we're not moving the tracks,
exactly,
a dedicated transit lane could open up a lot of possibilities, couldn't it?
Exactly. The reality is a thriving, successful city, the thriving, successful downtown will have traffic congestion. Not having traffic is a bad sign. So
I go out to the suburbs for things, and I will be somewhere in Royal Oak, or I'll be in Taylor, I'll be in Grosse Pointe, and I'll see streets that have more. And I know I've looked at the data. I've seen streets that have more traffic than Woodward Avenue.
Oh yeah,
right now. And it's a way that if we can take this as a unique opportunity as things are being built up, to build it the right way. We could do the same thing on Michigan and things like that.
Yeah.
So when looking into the future, another thing I noticed about this event, you had some real heavy hitters when it came to politicians there and people in the legislature in power to do things. What was the value of their support to you?
As I was mentioning, and as I know we've talked about before, transit takes funding. Just like we pay for parks and we pay for fire departments and police, and we need to invest in those things to make them good. Transit, we spend in our region about a third per capita of what most major metropolitan areas spend on transit. And that's one of the reasons we have such a limited system. So in addition to making a lot of these important but modest steps forward as we have been, we need to also look at getting substantially more funding. At some point, that will probably mean another effort at the ballot. It's not coming right away, but the state at one point in time used to cover half the costs of running local bus service.
So for listeners to understand, in the past, and this is something I've covered so many times in the last 20 years, there has been a push over time for an additional RTA ballot funding or raising funding directly through some sort of millage. you're saying, sure, that's something we could look at in the future. But also, there are options like federal money that already could be available and unlocked, or state dollars for specific things where we could reprogram and reprioritize and then be able to put that into transit. Is that kind of where you're going at?
Exactly. Yes. We will absolutely need at some point in the near future to have a regional transit ballot measure that will increase how much we're investing locally. But the state also spends something like $7 billion a year on transportation. Like 7% of that actually goes to transit. We could increase that a couple of percentage points. Should maybe 15% of the entire transportation investment go into things like rail and transit and bike lanes and senior shuttles.
And that wouldn't just benefit Detroit or Metro Detroit. There are other regions in the state this would benefit
Absolutely.
as well.
Did you know, actually, there are 77 different transit agencies across the state of Michigan?
I actually have no idea. Oh my gosh. Okay, 77.
They serve at least parts of all 83 counties. Every county in Michigan has at least some level of public transit service. A lot of those are more of like senior shuttles.
Or paratransit or something.
Yeah, paratransit to get seniors and people with disabilities shopping and appointments
I
and
think
stuff.
about growing areas like Grand Rapids, though.
That's true.
So often the public conversation is painted in a very partisan manner about cities and transit. But like the west side of the state is a little different politically than the east side. And yet you see them also looking and investing in urban style development and saying like, hey, at times, like investing in these things is important.
Absolutely. So yeah, whether we're talking about the rural senior shuttle or whether we're talking about bus rapid transit line down one of the major urban corridors in any of our larger cities, we need the state to be increasing their investment. We have a lot of state leaders who are saying good things about the importance of cities, about the importance of attracting people to Michigan, about being equitable and having climate solutions, all of those things that tie right back to transit. Now it's time for our state leaders to kind of put their money where their mouth is and really make serious financial investments in public transit. The state's got to support.
They even mentioned a bit of bipartisanship in this.
Yes, there's a new transit legislative caucus being set up. Representative Jason Morgan, Mike McFall, who I think was on not too long ago. They are working on putting together a transit caucus, and all of our guests the other night have agreed to be part of it. Senator McMurrow, Senator Jeff Irwin, Representative Donna McKinney. But I guess at this point, they've got 36 legislators who are all committed to be part of this caucus, including at least one or two Republicans.
That's an actual sizable caucus.
Yeah.
And to me, that's huge because I feel like having covered transit now for many years, we didn't have that same kind of thing. Like we would have ideas that came up, but we would have to be begging a county executive or two to get on board with something, or we'd have to have a carve out for this particular city or whatever. It's a whole different thing when the legislators in a representative democracy are like, hey, I feel like I can stand on the business enough to say, I'm going to lean behind this. And not only are we going to do a push for a one-time thing, but how can we fit this into the culture of legislation to push that forward?
Yeah, I think it was President Biden who likes to say, a budget is a moral document. Don't tell me what matters to you. Show me your budget. And that tells me what you care about.
I say that as a reporter because people will all the time say, oh, I really want this thing to happen or another thing. But you look at a municipality's budget or you look at a company and saying, well, where are they actually spending their money? That tells you what their actual priorities are and what they actually value. And I know that some people that might feel a little shallow. It's like, well, I should go with the feeling. No, at the end of the day, money has worth and money tells you, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit. Even if it's $1, $5 or whatever. I'm willing to sacrifice a bit to do this because I think one of the challenges in the overall regional conversation about transit is I've seen a lot of people say, I really like the idea, but the challenge comes, am I willing to spend a little bit more money? I would argue that some of this also is difficult. And, there have been a number of things discussed in Lansing and whatever, but like looking at things like how do we fund it through different ways and maybe just property tax? Because a little hint, when I send a reporter down to Indianapolis, they don't fund it through a property tax. They fund it through a sales tax. That is currently not legal in Michigan.
Correct.
And a lot of the vehicles that we use to fund these things, I think about it this way. Like if a municipality wants to say, or a county wants to do a lot more with it, there's actually limited funding options you can do. And I also learned that there are structural issues. I'm getting to somewhere here, and I'm a little off the beaten path. I did not know about the legal difficulties in putting rail that are in the RTA. I was like, wow, I'm pretty nerdy, but I didn't know that one. Wow. So that's why this caucus is so important. Just so people know, like, what was that little thing that I learned? Because I learned that basically the way it's structured, like you need a supermajority to do it and it makes it functionally impossible.
Yeah, the RTA has board members from Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Washtenaw counties and Detroit. And you have to have a supermajority where maybe it's even unanimous. I can't remember. Certain votes.
Is it 4 out of 5? So possibly even 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5?
You need to have an affirmative vote from every single one of those jurisdictions. And you need to have at least, I think, 7 of the 9 votes. I mean, again,
because also people don't realize there's multiple
There's
representatives
2 people
from each. So it's not like I am the person who represents Oakland or whatever. There's actually 2, which is an extremely complex. It's almost like it was written to fail.
Well, a lot of it was written to make L. Brooks Patterson in Oakland County go along with it. He never liked it, but there was enough arm twisting that he accepted it. But he wrote into it a bunch of vetoes, a lot of ways that one county can say, I don't like what is being proposed. And rail, he was adamantly opposed to any investment in rail in the region.
So what that tells me is that then, let's say Wayne and Washtenaw wanted to do something, Oakland, which would have no business on it, could stop it.
Yeah.
That's insanity.
That's one of the things we're working to change.
Okay, really? So there's a work to change that?
Oh, absolutely. We're actively working on it. We've actually got a whole 10-point platform of different recommendations for ways the state could take meaningful action to help improve transit. And we're touching on a number of them. The RTA was created under state law. It can be tweaked. It was created in 2012. Some things have changed over the last decade. So let's tweak how the RTA works, how they vote, things of that sort, to give it a little bit more flexibility. So if 2 counties or 3 want to move forward with a rail line or move forward with a ballot measure, you don't have to have that unanimous support from all 4. Because, to be honest, Macomb's not interested in spending another dime on transit beyond the smart service. They like their smart service, but they don't want anything to invest anything more. Yeah. Fine. But they shouldn't be stopping.
They shouldn't be able to block
Wayne, Oakland, and Washtenaw.
Does this even reach into the money part where, let's say Wayne wanted to fund something for itself? This is complete theoretical, but the airport's completely in Wayne County. And let's say in this theoretical world, Wayne County wanted to go airport to downtown with a rail line. Macomb, who doesn't pay for it, could stop it.
Depending on how it's funded, they could stop the RTA from doing it.
Which is, by the way, the organization that dispenses the money.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
listeners, who do you wow.
But legislators are open to changing it. Actually, Senator Jeff Irwin mentioned he's already in the midst of drafting a bill. I've had conversations with his office, with Senator McMurrow's, about what sort of changes make sense so the RTA can be more functional today. Just like Representative Jason Morgan mentioned, he's working on a bill that would specifically say the state constitution allows for a certain amount of the auto-related sales taxes. It says they shall go to comprehensive transit purposes. And yet we're only using a sliver of what is allowed. So he's working on a bill to change that, to put more of the existing state dollars into things like transit and rail.
And people do not realize that those auto taxes are a huge part. People wonder why is the auto industry so oftenly focused in conversation, whatever. Those auto taxes are a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's whatever the source. Like you said, we need to have more options for funding transit. That is one of the things we're really looking at the state to do. Yeah, to be honest, I've been at this over 15 years. It used to be when we were going up to the Capitol, we're trying to stop them from gutting things. We literally had the same exact budget for transit for, I think, about 8 straight years, ignoring little issues like inflation. So it's really exciting that we have state leaders who recognize that transit's important and are trying to dig in and figure out what's stopping us from developing the great transit we want and need, and how can we overcome those. So that's really, to some extent, the progress. Transportation Riders United started before me 20 plus years ago. Back then, the attitude was like, transit, who cares? Why bother? We're the Motor City.
I was going to ask you, as we look into 2024, why are you so optimistic and what are you optimistic about?
Part of it is that change in attitude from like, transit, who cares? And even when I started 12, 15 years ago, sometimes the attitude was, well, it'd be nice if we could have better transit, but it's never going to happen. It's impossible. It's
I see two things. I see one, a generational shift,
uh-huh.
because people like, I'm a millennial, but I'm an adult now, and we have a little bit different view. And then you also have Gen Z and everything else.
Yeah.
But you also have an economic shift where Michigan has had to come to a reckoning where there are areas where, you can feel that there is nothing wrong with what's going on in this state. And I know that. I've seen surveys about it. There's also lots of areas and lots of economic leaders who know differently.
That we could be doing a heck of a lot better. And that there are a lot of places that are very similar to us that are doing a heck of a lot better. So the fact that there's a broader attitude now among civic leaders, political leaders, and a lot of the broader populace, far from everybody, but a lot more, who say, yes, we need better transit. How are we going to overcome these barriers? How are we going to invest? Where do we need to put it next? How do we make it successful? So at least we're having the right conversations. And like you said, we had 5 top state leaders all coming in front of a stage of transit activists and agencies and supporters and riders and committing, yes, we're going to make it happen. Let's work together to make it happen. So I think there's huge potential between the federal funding that is still coming in, making sure that we're ready as a region and that the transit agencies are able to really seize that. Some of the plannings come together. Even DDOT and SMART are both developing updated, modernized plans for how they can improve their service.
Even the vibe of cooperation was big. On stage. That's one thing I wanted to note, is that the vibe of cooperation, I know it's a little hippy-dippy, but it was truly there.
Yeah, absolutely. And to some extent, some of those folks have worked together for a while. But one of the goals of the Regional Transit Authority was to improve collaboration, was to get DDOT and SMART and the Q Line and the People Mover. And let's not forget our friends in Ann Arbor. Mm-hmm. There's also several dozen smaller local providers. How do we make sure they're all working effectively together? And then how do we break down some of the barriers? So RTA has been doing some really good efforts. And where's there a gap? How can we overcome it? Again, until there is a major dedicated funding source, we're going to be looking at modest improvements, but modest improvements can make a real difference. I mean, I've got 2 interns from Ann Arbor who can come in every week on that D2A2 bus who would not otherwise be able to be there. So those small changes can be really meaningful in people's lives.
And for people sitting at home, there is a reality to the growing economic cloud of Ann Arbor. Mm-hmm. And the investment that is happening there, and how much, if you look like even in an area like Silicon Valley or others, you have a 45-minute commute or a 45-minute, there's a tie bar there where more and more Ann Arbor is becoming more economically important. And also those connections to Detroit are economically and important for jobs and everything else.
Yeah, Doug Song from Ann Arbor.
He's on my list of people I'd love to have on this show. Yes. So Doug, if you happen to hear this, send me an email.
Yes. Well, he had a great point that it sometimes feels like I-275 is this barrier, is this moat, and it's really hard to get people to connect across it. And having things like the D2A2 bus is a step in the right direction. Hopefully we can shift that to a train in the near future. But the more we can really make connections between Wayne County and Washtenaw County, that's really powerful for both. But there are some real gaps right now that we need to overcome.
So if somebody wants to work on those gaps, add feedback, support what you're doing, learn more, what can they do?
Well, certainly come to DetroitTransit.org. That is the website for True. We're all also on all the socials at Detroit Transit. And we invite people to get involved. We have a regular volunteer committee. We're arranging meetings for local residents who care about transit to sit down with their legislators and explain why transit's important to them and share some of these policy ideas. I always got to make the pitch, become a member. As you said, those dollars, if you care about transit, support True so we can be there 365 days a year. We're educating, advocating, mobilizing people to get involved and to make meaningful changes in public transit. We're a pretty small group, but the more we can bring people together around transit, the more powerful impact that we can have.
Absolutely. Megan Owens, Transportation Writers United. Thank you so much.
Thank you.